Welcome back to the Tactical Pause podcast. I'm Kevin Price.
I'm Kevin Reed.
And I'm Armando Macias.
And if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel. That's the best way to help us with the YouTube algorithm. Devin Poore grew up in rural northeastern Washington, graduating from Curlew High School in Ferry County in 2012. He then moved to Seattle to attend the University of Washington, but left without a degree, working in the service industry as a valet to make ends meet before moving into warehouse management. Eventually, he enrolled in a web software course through UW's School of Professional and Continuing Education and pivoted to software engineering, the field he's worked in professionally since 2020. In 2022, he returned to Eastern Washington. The range of experience, rural to urban, service industry to blue collar to white collar, is a cornerstone of Devin's decision to run for Congress. Focused on one of the most pressing issues in the country, a corrupt, pay-to-play political system that the clear majority of voters oppose, regardless of party. Alongside that, he's advocated an affirmative vision for Central Washington, centered on energy, agriculture, and rural investment to make the region more resilient for generations to come. And we welcome you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Well, I want to jump right in and ask, first of all, what led you to decide to make this run for Congressional District 4?
It's the first question. It's the question I always get. Everyone asks this. Also, I got this question last week in a TV interview that I did, and I was so mad at myself. I feel like I completely whiffed it, even though I've answered it so many times. In part because it's a multifaceted decision. It's not like there's just this one single thing that leads you to it. It's a really big life decision, as I've discovered. You kind of uproot yourself in significant ways and kind of throw your privacy into the shredder to an extent. And so anyway, for me, I've always had an interest in politics. I was pretty inspired in 2015 by Bernie's run for office in the 2015-2016 primary. And, more than anything, I think we can all recognize how that 2016 election cycle has defined like the era of our politics since. And I think that, Trump's first win shocked a lot of people, but in particular, the way that when Bernie ran his campaign and spoke to a lot of people who were my age, I'm 31 now, about, he was critical of our government in ways that we weren't, I think, very accustomed to hearing. And so it led myself, and I think a lot of people my age, to start really being more critical and just digging into the state of our politics. And fundamentally opening the eyes, I think, of a lot of Americans to the influence of money primarily. And that was the real, that was the fundamental issue that made me decide I need to run for office. So, Trump gets into office last year, gets inaugurated again, and all hell breaks loose, especially left of center from that point of view. And it's so easy to get whipsawed around in that emotional environment and in that political environment. I'm running in a very deep red district. I was looking for a way that personally inspired me, something that I feel real personal conviction about, that I think there's more cross-partisan and even non-partisan appeal. And for me, that was this issue of money in politics, campaign finance reform, corruption. This is a universal, I would argue, one of the big reasons Trump himself has had the political success that he has had. But I saw a Democratic Party, not speaking to it. Of course, the Republicans are not going to talk about this issue. Neither party is centering this. And, setting aside my own emotion and feelings about the president on any given day, it's I really believe this is a core generational challenge that my generation's going to have to kind of pick up the mantle of and ask ourselves tough questions about how we build a political movement to address some of those concerns. And it just really is going to require, in my view, discipline and focus and trying to stay to the best of your ability out of the partisan vortexes that exist in our our politics. And so anyway, roundabout way of saying that primary issue was kind of what drew me in, and I wanted to build a campaign around that and really bring that to voters in this district and see how they responded. And then of course, like on top of that, there's a regional specific, district specific set of ideas and policy focuses that emerge out of some of the unique challenges we face here. I know that's a long answer. One final note before I sign off and hand it back to you. I grew up in Eastern Washington. So one of these kind of, a lot of people think of Washington as this deeply blue state. And it is pretty reliably at the state level, right? It votes for a Democrat for president, and the state level offices are blue. But there is this real political divide along the Cascade Mountain Range, like east of the Cascades, it's deeply conservative. That's where I grew up. West of the Cascades, it's very liberal. And so I also am running in this district that's east of the mountains. And I'm running and I'm trying to, I guess another thing that I really felt needed to be taken seriously, if you're going to run in this district and you're not running as a Republican, you've got to take seriously that there are a whole lot of voters east of the mountains who feel totally shut out from power, totally shut out from the conversation at the state level, and they just associate the state of Washington, Olympia, with the Democratic Party, and it's a non-starter. And so if there's kind of this mission of like, we're in a moment where we need to try to deny some power to the Republican Party at the federal level, which I think is a noble goal, you've just got to approach that with a real appreciation for the degree to which people in Eastern Washington don't like the Democrats either.
Yeah, when I saw that you were running for the Cascade Party, when KP finally said, "Oh, hey, we're going to interview this guy," and I thought, that's really cool. That's an innovative thing. I've never heard of it before. Obviously, it's geographically named. But explain to us how this is different from a Democrat or a Republican.
Well, initially, I kicked off the campaign as an independent, right? So for many, many months, I was running as an independent, and we got to talking with the Cascade Party, which is a relatively new party in the state of Washington. But they are an officially recognized party here. So they had checked out my campaign, or they had seen it. They liked kind of the platforms that I've laid out and the things I was running on. And so we just started having some conversations, and their whole, in many ways, our missions are aligned, right? We're living this moment where so many people, more and more people, are registering as independent. More and more people, are fed up with both major parties because of so many of the obvious ways we see that dynamic breaking down, I think, and consequential ways we see that dynamic breaking down at the federal level. And so, they've been engaged in a similar project, but more at the state level, of trying to offer this, build another kind of third option, which is so hard. I mean, this is the perennial conversation, right, around like independence and third parties, which very often just get treated as an afterthought. And there's a reason for that. It's very difficult to run outside of either of the two main parties. And but anyway, to I guess specifically answer, when it comes to the Cascade Party, like, they have some policies laid out. They have some other, their board votes on these resolutions in terms of like the official party position, but they are trying to be a more moderate option, although moderate is not really the word that they like to use. They like to, think of themselves as nonconformists. I think modern and centrist suggests that you're looking for like the perfect middle between two options. It's not always the case that's, like what the right thing to do. Sometimes you should be bringing a issue to the table that no one else is talking about, right? Like one of their big voting reform ideas is all around proportional voting, which, has gotten some traction recently in light of the Voting Rights Act stuff and these gerrymandering fights. But I don't think largely people were talking about proportional voting prior to some of that stuff. But Cascade Party was, they had a focus on it long before. And they've also kind of embraced, there's an act in Congress right now called the Dignity Act, and it's an immigration reform bill, a pretty comprehensive immigration reform bill. It's not been taken up by either the leadership in either major party, but it's just kind of a rogue effort, I guess, by some of the members of the House. But for the Cascade Party, they've like officially adopted that with some changes, right, as like their official stance on immigration. So you have or like the starting point. This is where we should begin, and we should go from here with some minor tweaks. So yeah, they're just trying to really present solutions instead of anxiety as a political project or product. And yeah, so I was drawn to that. They didn't ask me to change anything about my platform, which was also something I made sure to, uh, get assurances from them before I decided to run or agreed to run under their banner. It was like my platform is my own, and also they want to learn more about kind of some of the pressing issues that are affecting Eastern Washington, since most of their members right now are in Western Washington. They're trying to form that bridge. So that's a lot of detail, but that's kind of the history of how that came together.
Yeah, when it comes to words like, centrist and moderate, I mean, with Washington, D.C., it seems like the moderate candidate is really like kind of like a moderate Republican. He's real safe. But when it comes to the actual issues, I always think of the word centrist and moderate as the more popular things that's affecting all of us. Like, there's a fringe over here, there's a fringe over here, maybe like private healthcare over here, which is not very popular. Money in politics, maybe some people want money in politics because they do, but for the majority of us, like the center position is we got to get it out. And looking at it from that image, from that bell curve image, what would you say in your district are those issues that you see the most?
Yeah, the big things I've been focused on that come up over and over again: healthcare access, our agricultural industry and the challenges it's facing, water issues and availability, just in general, but also in the context of an ongoing drought that we've been facing here in Eastern Washington, and wildfire concerns, I think, is the other major one. And for I think that there's some, I guess, variety of views here in terms of how to tackle some of this stuff. But yeah, none of the, when I've been on the campaign trail, like talking about some of my ideas to address these challenges, it's like, it's what you say, like, it's more thinking about, like, let's say a consensus position you can build, to your point, right? Like, it's a majoritarian approach rather than pander to the fringes on either side. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a moderate idea or a moderate policy. One of the things that we've had over the last 15 years, as many as 1,400 farms have closed across District 4. They keep closing. They continue to close. And this is a heavily agricultural district. Agriculture is facing challenges across the nation, but it's acutely felt when your district is like, when 60% of the economy of your district is coming out of agriculture. And there's a lot of reasons why that is, right? We have corporate consolidation across the ag industry, right? In the input supply sector and the distribution sector, even sometimes in the producer sector itself, that smaller farmers and family farmers are competing against these mega operations, which means farmers end up being like price takers and competing without being able to set their prices. Then tariffs have dramatically impacted things as well. Right to repair laws, or I guess the lack of right to repair laws, foot farmers with all these bills, right? So when you talk about these things, like, there's really no dispute. There's no like disagreement over that. Across the district, like, these questions get asked, and when I'm talking to people about these issues and kind of trying to diagnose the problem, no one is saying to me like, no way, you've got it so wrong. I think the area where then I try to differentiate myself is to say, okay, like, what have we been doing to try to address these agricultural concerns? For the last 10 years, it's just been like farmer bailouts, right? The federal government has given away cash, and that money disappears as soon as it shows up, right? They've got to pay their creditors, they've got to pay their suppliers, whatever. It's not a sustainable fix. And so what I've really been focused on campaigning on is, like, if we want a durable agricultural economy where our smaller operators, independent operators can survive and like keep that economic dynamism here in our region, we're going to have to think about ways to make investments to diversify this sector. And what I've kind of honed in on is like clean energy deployments, right? Solar deployments on agricultural land. And it's not, the idea is not get rid of the agriculture. The idea is like, how can you balance these two things so that a farmer who's got maybe 100 acres or something can use 5 or 10 of those acres for energy production, have a stable, predictable revenue stream for like 10 years. They sign these power purchase agreements and still be able to produce their agricultural output. But if they're kind of at the mercy of the commodities up or down, those markets, like in a given year, it's like, well, I still have this energy production and I'm still able to generate that energy alongside, my agriculture operation. And so that's an idea that when I bring that to people and I talk to people about that, again, there's no kind of immediate knee jerk like opposition. I hate that idea. It doesn't make any sense. People can get on board with a good idea when they hear it. If someone disagrees or one of my fellow candidates disagree or something, then they should propose that's politics. I'm just saying, I look around the district. These are the challenges I see. Here's a possible solution I think would start to resolve some of these challenges. I'm putting it on the table. I'm trying to bring it to voters, and voters like it when they hear it, when I talk to them about it. If you have a better idea, like, please, I live here. Let's let the best idea win. But yeah, so that's an idea where it's like, is that a moderate idea? Is it a centrist idea? Not really.
No, it's 100%. You said it better, than I could. It's the good idea, right? And even here in Colorado, there's farmers that would love that. And these farmers here, they vote every way. I mean, I got in Colorado, I'm in Denver, Colorado, and Fort Collins and Loveland, it's more Republican voting. Or Fort Collins is CSU, so it's more liberal. Loveland's Republican. It's a mix in Colorado. But I talk to farmers all the time with my brother, and they're like, dude, we would love something like that. But nobody talks about it. They don't propose it. They don't talk about it. Nothing.
Even in Yakima County, which is one of the big counties in this district, hugely agriculture, based economy, like many of the counties are throughout this district. But one of the current county commissioners is one of the candidates in this race. And she, for a period of time, several years at least, I think she was the architect of this. I think she was. I think she's the one who pushed for this policy of a solar moratorium in Yakima County on agricultural land. So in like 2024, I think, the state of Washington passed this bill that allows agrivoltaics, which is exactly what I'm describing, right? Installing solar on agricultural land. They exempted that from the preferential tax treatment of agricultural land, right? You get certain tax breaks, property tax breaks, if you're a farmer with hundreds of acres and you're running agriculture. And what the state of Washington said was, we're going to exempt solar. So you're not going to jeopardize your preferential tax status on agricultural land if you install solar. And that's great. It's like, great, let's take advantage of that. Meanwhile, in Yakima County, they had passed, driven by Commissioner McKinney, as far as I understand it, they had passed this solar moratorium. It was like, no solar. Our county is basically going to have the ability to nix it. And they just a couple months ago reversed it. Finally, I spoke with another county commissioner. So she voted to keep it in place. But I had a conversation with another county commissioner, one of the two who had voted to overturn it. And I explained to him exactly what I just explained to you. And he was like, this guy's a Republican. He's like, this is a great idea. And I was like, well, good job getting rid of the moratorium. Now the road is cleared. And I think, in my view, it's just a matter of investment. We've spent, like, the federal government's already handed out $40 or $50 billion, if not more, over the last decade in direct cash subsidies. Imagine how much infrastructure we could have built, how much of this kind of infrastructure we could have built across our country with that much money. It's crazy.
I do want to talk about housing affordability, because that is a very big issue across Washington state. I know, even like with homelessness, I know it's probably more concentrated in areas like Tacoma and Seattle and things like that. But I do know it's still definitely an issue in District 4 and in the rural communities. What solutions do you support in helping to solve the housing crisis?
To be honest with you, I actually think we're in a decent policy environment for the first time in a while. This act just passed Congress. I don't know if you're familiar, this 21st Century Road to Housing Act, I think is what it was called. And it was this very bipartisan bill that Trump declined to sign. I think it just became law maybe at midnight yesterday or something, because 10 days had gone by. And so it just automatically became law. But that bill contains quite a few provisions that, especially in kind of smaller cities to bigger cities, which, yes, we live in a rural district, so there are some more unique challenges, I think, when it comes to some of our rural communities. But for any population center that's above like 25,000 people, I think that bill unlocks a lot of expedited building, opportunity. And combined with I think it was a 2023 law here in Washington that had to do with housing density. It was a pretty comprehensive zoning reform bill that basically says any locality between 25,000 and 75,000 residents, you can't zone for single family housing at the local level, and above 75,000, you have to allow minimum quadplexes on a given lot. So I actually think we're in an environment right now, given this federal bill that just passed, to start seeing housing get built a lot more rapidly, especially in Washington, alongside this other state bill. But it's been a long time coming, right? Like a lot of this stuff has just happened. This federal bill just happened yesterday. The state bill just happened a couple years ago, and so I think there's going to be a bit of a catching up to do here when it comes to the market, and builders within the market realizing, okay, we can expedite, we can build for cheaper. And so Congress, in my view, has a duty right now, given that they've just passed this, to really be promoting and advocating the measures within this bill and speaking directly to the home builders and developers who need to know this information, right? Like, hey, you guys know you can, this has been adjusted, this process has been adjusted, you have more favorable FHA insurance terms, right? Like, the information has got to get to the right people. In some of the rural communities, this stuff doesn't apply as much because a lot of that is targeted at like bigger cities. And we have some of that throughout this district, but we also have a lot of smaller towns. There have been, I think, more state level environmental decisions that can prevent some building. I was speaking with some folks actually up in the Methow Valley, which is a pretty rural area. It's kind of this district, which is a very Republican dominated, or at least right of center dominated district. It's a bit of a liberal enclave. And I was talking to some folks up there, and they were saying, yeah, we have issues with housing affordability, but there's this progressive group down in like Yakima, Tri-Cities. I can't remember the name of them. It's in my notes somewhere, but they had just been celebrating some victory around, this group in the city is all about density, right? They want to build dense housing and walkable neighborhoods and all that. That's great. But when you need to build a home out in the Methow Valley, like, you just need to build homes. And so the tension is, you have like a group of progressives who I'm speaking with in the Methow saying this other group of progressives, they're advocating for something good down where they live. But the result of that is keeping us from being able to build the kind of housing. We don't have a land problem up here. We have plenty of land. It's relatively affordable. We're just facing these blocks. I think a lot of those are more state level barriers, to be honest with you. And I think some of it probably comes down to being an interlocutor maybe between some of these groups and trying to bring people together to say like, hey, like, you guys are advocating for this over here. That makes sense, but it doesn't make sense to paint with such a broad brush because there are communities that are being hurt by that kind of policy unnecessarily. Another thing that I would say that I've been kind of advocating for, I haven't been able to speak a whole lot about it on the campaign trail because it's such a wonky policy idea. But it's this notion of a land value tax versus a property tax. So there was this guy in the 19th century named Henry George, prominent American politician and kind of activist author. And this is the big thing he advocated for, is something called a land value tax. And the primary difference between a land value tax and a property tax is that a land value tax only taxes the unimproved value of land. And a property tax taxes improvements onto the land. And so the people who advocate for an LVT, they look at a property tax and they say, what are the two main things a property tax incentivizes or disincentivizes? It incentivizes just sitting on a piece of land, right? And it could be really high value piece of land, like in a small town, even a 10,000 person kind of population center. If you're just sitting on like an acre of land kind of near the downtown core, you don't have to spend any capital or energy or time or make any investments into improving that land. You can just sit on it and you get charged very little because you haven't improved it. And if 10 or 20 years go by, you can very likely turn around and sell it for a huge profit. The result of that is you're kind of artificially restraining the supply of usable land in this area. And the other impact of a property tax is that if you do have land, you might be reticent to invest in it or build on it because you know you're going to take a big property tax hike if you do that. And a land value tax inverts that, right? It says, actually, any investment you make into land that you hold, you don't get taxed on it. You get taxed on the unimproved value, which means like the transition here from a property tax system to a land value tax system would kind of involve some pretty sophisticated assessments, right? You have to like keep the municipal funding relatively stable and kind of pick your date and move from there. But when I've been largely swayed by arguments around land value tax in the way that if you moved to a land value tax, you would see a lot more land being developed a lot more quickly into stuff like housing. And you would see like real competition for once between landlords. Because if I'm a landlord and I own an acre of land and I want to build some housing on it, like I have nothing but upside, right? Like if a competing landowner across town has an acre and they build like 4 units on their land, great, they build 4 units. I could build a small apartment building with like 12 units that are nice, and I'm not being punished for that. It's upside for me to like increase the housing supply.
There's countries that do that today.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not common in the U.S. There are some places. Pennsylvania has a few counties, I think, that have implemented this, and it's been successful. Although I think it's a split rate. They still have a kind of property tax split rate with the LVT. But this is not something that could be federally mandated, right? This is still set at the local level or at the county level. But I think that what Congress could do, what I would advocate for, is setting some funds aside to incentivize any counties or localities that want to experiment with this. Like, hey, here's some money that might be available for roads or other kind of infrastructure. It's like this additional grant block that if you experiment with this LVT thing, you might have access to some of this. So I would, like I said, I've been swayed. I think it's worth running the experiment. And I think that's kind of how our country should think of itself more often is like we should be willing to try new things, not get so locked in to one mode and think we've got to do that in every single state and every single county. It's like we can experiment with things. If it seems to be working according to like the theory of the person who proposed it, then great, like we learned something. If not, we can roll it back. It's not the end of the world, right? Like we have that ability, we have that capacity. So those are, I get a long answer short. I actually am feeling more optimistic about some of the policy conditions right now around housing. And I also think that, getting some localities to agree maybe to experiment with something like a land value tax could also unlock a lot of potential in that arena.
So it sounds like you kind of I live in very rural Missouri, out in the east central part of the state. It is 45 minutes from my house to an emergency room. Where we used to be the regional hospital area, and it of course was sold by venture capital, Noble Health, not to name drop, but you're scum. And the average age of our community is almost in their 60s. So you've got a serious issue if you've got a heart attack or a stroke or something. Well, what are some of your ideas to help increase access to healthcare in rural spaces?
Universal healthcare. I mean, that's my answer. Like, we should have a universal healthcare system, and we should publicly fund our healthcare infrastructure. It's pretty straightforward. Now, I say it's pretty straightforward. I think we're in a really difficult moment to try to actually get universal healthcare over the finish line. We have $40 trillion we're $40 trillion in debt. Healthcare is expensive. I mean, we'd be able to consolidate a lot of existing federal programs and roll them into a universal system, but it's still going to be more expensive. And so, the kind of funding mechanism may well include some marginal tax hike, right? And it might be like across the board, or certainly across the kind of middle class board. And the middle class is so strapped right now, like they certainly don't want to hear that, even if at the end of the day, like it's still going to be cheaper over time, right? It's going to be, you're removing your health insurance bill and you're replacing it with this smaller tax in theory, right? Will it work out that way for every single middle class American? Probably not. That's like the unfortunate reality of taxation and how it gets doled out. But in, I guess, nearer term, this district that I'm in, District 4, has the highest Medicaid usage of any district in the state of Washington. It's like close to 40%. And a lot of that is a consequence of exactly what you're talking about. We have a lot of small towns. A lot of those small towns might have one or two or zero employers that actually offer benefits, that actually offer healthcare to their employees. So you have a lot of self-employed people, and you have a lot of part-time workers, and they don't make a lot of money, and Medicaid is really their option, or the ACA. There's obviously heavy ACA reliance too in this district, and both of those programs, as we know, I'm sure your listeners are aware, like of the cuts made to Medicaid and the cuts, the expiration of the ACA subsidies. But a lot of the Medicaid cuts actually haven't even gone into effect yet. So this has been a perennial theme on the campaign trail, the anxiety around healthcare, especially in our more rural communities. I think people are kind of bracing for what these cuts are about to do. In last year's reconciliation bill, there was like $50 billion made available for this like rural hospital fund or something. But that's like 60% of what, and it expires after 5 years. So it's only, keeping Medicaid funding in place where it was prior to the cuts from last year would have funded these hospitals, these rural clinics and things at like 40% higher kind of in perpetuity into the future. Now they're seeing a significant cut, and after 5 years, that's gone too. So yeah, the immediate term thing is to get back, to look very closely at all those cuts that were made to Medicaid last year and say, like, maybe there were some inefficiencies that genuinely could have been carved out of the system. Fantastic. If there were, great. But those cuts need to be really revisited, especially for a district like this, where that's the ball game in some of these rural communities. If Medicaid and the ACA kind of go, if the lights go out, it's not going to be good, and we're going to end up spending more in healthcare in the long term, because now you're going to have populations of people who are going to put off getting care. They're going to have conditions that fester and get worse over time, and like by the time they do get health care, like they're forced to because they have some medical emergency, it's going to be more expensive for them and the system. So this is why I get back to universal healthcare, not only kind of from a moral point of view, but like just from a practical point of view. Having easier access, cheaper access, prevents a lot of additional costs down the road. We have to think of it a bit like we're making an investment into the future health of our country, which is what it is.
Yeah, and I want to stay on healthcare, but transition to veterans. There's just a lot of wonky stuff that's going on with the VA right now. They're denying people and rolling back VA claims. Like I'm hearing people go from 100% down to 70 because they had a phone call and, how you doing today? Oh, I'm doing good. Oh, you're good? Okay, cool. And then they just reduce their rating. It's like, what the heck was that?
This is for like the disability rating.
Yeah. So like all these different things that are going on. So just generally when it comes to veterans and healthcare at the VA and wait times, what do you think should be done, if you made it to Congress to hold them accountable and to work on those issues?
I mean, it's a pretty safe bet that I oppose. To be honest, if this administration is making cuts to the VA, like I've heard those stories too about disability claims, especially. I guess the only question mark I have here in my mind is like, I think it probably still makes sense to maintain a VA focused healthcare system, even if we achieved a universal healthcare system, because to the extent that there are like waiting lines or, ability to not access care when you need it as a veteran, I think that is kind of like in my view, something that you should earn as a veteran. Like you should earn a bit of an express service to your own healthcare. But, the behind the scenes mechanics in terms of like what you get, what is covered and what you have access to should just be, it's the same. It's just universal. You're sick, you get care. Whether you're a citizen, whether you're a veteran. If you're a veteran, you might be fast tracked in your own clinics, and those should be funded to the hilt. And this kind of chasing of disability ratings to try to squeeze, like, how much is that really going to save the U.S. government? In our $7 trillion budget, it's like a rounding error of a rounding error, just to harass veterans. Like, it's unconscionable. It's ridiculous. It's just a ridiculous way to spend your time too, when we have much bigger issues that need to be focused on. It's like, anyway. So yeah, I'm certainly opposed to those kinds of cuts. I mean, pretty simple.
I have one last question before we close, and we'll definitely give you an opportunity to plug your web information and donation information as well. Now, I know I have tried my best to support some third-party candidates in the past, and one thing I will say is I'm very impressed about your campaign, because I can tell that you're really out there and you're really engaged in the community. And that's one area I've always gotten burned with third-party candidates. At first there's a lot of hype, and then they kind of fizzle out, and I'm like, what did I put my money behind, man? That goes away from my question. But if elected, how would you work with Democrats and Republicans? Because I know everything is so polarized right now. How would you work across the aisle to actually get legislation passed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like to think that, as we talked a bit about some of the ideas in my campaign, that some of it is novel enough, maybe, that there wouldn't be this like reflexive opposition to some of these things. I will say, like, if I won in this district, it would be kind of stealing a Republican seat, right? So I think that on the Democratic side, there's an ability to go engage with Democratic stakeholders and say, like, hey, listen, I flipped a really challenging seat, right? And I'm not going to line up with you with everything. I'm not going to caucus with you, right? But here are some of my priorities, right? If you're willing to work with me on some of these things, like, then I will be an honest vote on investigations and impeachment or whatever, right? Like, I'll do my duty as a congressman. I won't just stonewall because the president or his administration happens to be Republican conservative. So I think there's utility they'd find in that. And then on the Republican side, there's a caucus actually called the Western Caucus. And it's fairly sizable. I think there's like 120, 130 members in it. And it's all Republicans. It used to be a more bipartisan caucus, but it's a lot of, Western state representatives. And I would definitely join that caucus. And that would be my kind of like gateway, I think, in my view, to the Republicans, because I would be able to, through that kind of coalition, be like, hey, we in the Western United States, like, we're so many of the concerns that I'm running on are shared common universal concerns: wildfire concerns, drought and water access issues, agriculture, like rural healthcare. Like, these are universal issues for almost everyone representing a district in the Western United States. I come in peace. Like, here are some of my solutions and thoughts. Like, let's have a conversation. Is there anyone here who can get behind some of this stuff? And I think there would be, right? I think, like, I do believe that there are honest congressmen, even though I'm running, with the kind of rah anti-corruption. Like, that's real. I also think there are genuinely, good, well-intentioned members of Congress in both parties. And then I also would say that, District 4 is flanked by two other districts, right? There's District 5 to the east that's represented by a Republican right now. District 8 to the west, represented by a Democrat. And so to win as an independent third party candidate, I would go talk to both of those, assuming they both win re-election or someone from their party wins. It would be like a day one item, or actually probably a pre-swearing in item, to connect with them and say, like, we have so many shared concerns in Eastern Washington that overlap across all our districts. We've got a Republican, we've got a Democrat, we've got an independent. We need to, like, really cooperate with each other and focus on the ways that fronting solutions. And again, here are some of my ideas, but these are going to have positive impacts across all of our districts, in my view. So let's start to form that kind of nonpartisan dialogue. And it's hard though, right? It's hard. Things are so polarized. Neither team wants to kind of give away a goal to the other team. So it's not going to be easy. It's just kind of like, that would be where my mentality would be to start. And you find yourself in a strange and distant land in DC, right? With a very different culture from what I'm used to in this line of employment that requires you to engage with your colleagues in a very unique way. So there's going to be a learning curve as well. And some of these answers, or my theory about how I might be able to kind of walk in and start engaging with people, that it might fall apart, right? And then you kind of have to say, okay, time to re-examine this and pivot, but always stay focused on, like, what is my goal fundamentally? It's to get some of these ideas over the finish line and then get back to my district and communicate to the people who are here. Here are the resources we've secured. Like, let's get to work taking advantage of them and bringing them here, bringing them home.
So for the audience members who are listening and say, man, I really want to get involved helping this guy. I really want to, maybe they want to block walk, or maybe they want to donate. Where can they go to help out your campaign?
Yeah, you can go to my website. It's Devin Poore, so that's the number 4, DEVIN 4WA.com. And you can see more about my policies. You can sign up for a kind of contact list there. And frankly, you can also just shoot me a Facebook message on my or an Instagram message directly. I think I have those channels just open. And so people have reached out to me just directly through DMs that way. So there are people I'm working with, several people already on the campaign, and that's the way they got in touch with me from the jump.
Well, it's been a great episode, fellas. To the audience, if y'all really like the episode and you want to catch the next one, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, and please catch us on the next episode of Tactical Pause Podcast.